I got a job as a summer intern on Capitol Hill. There, I discovered the fascinating world of Capitol Hill. And since I had read the Washington Post all my life, since I had been born in Washington, D.C., I thought, this is what I want to do. It was the electricity of watching reporters cover the pulse beat of the news of the country right before my eyes. I got a job at a local station as a copy boy. And I was just a gopher. By the time I graduated in June, the only job that was offered to me was as a newsroom secretary, which was so typical of women. It was 1969, and that's all we could get, secretarial jobs. I took it because I had my foot in the door, and I figured I could parlay it into something else. Just a few months later, a job for writer for the Anchorman opened up. At the time, since the civil rights law had passed in 1964, it created the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, which basically the civil rights law mandated that women, minorities, whatever, could not be discriminated against, and that we needed to have equal opportunities. One of the key events that occurred that had a profound effect on my getting each job was my sister-in-law. My husband is Maury Povich. His sister is named Lynn Povich, worked for Newsweek. She and the other researchers were unable to advance to writers, editors, reporters, anything out of the research category. They met in the ladies' room and decided to file a class action lawsuit against the Washington Post. And they won. Believe it or not, they changed the paradigm. Suddenly, corporations, including news organizations across the country, were basically on notice. They could not hire women anymore. They had to put women in important jobs. So therefore, when the writer's job opened up, I knew what the women's groups and the Black groups were doing. They were pressuring. So I went across the street to the bank where there was a very sharp Black teller, and she cashed my measly check every week. And I said, Tony, do you want to be a star at the TV station across the street? And she said, yes. So I dragged her across the street, and she got the job as newsroom secretary. Hooray. I became a writer, and I kept nudging the news director, who was so wonderful, and he finally gave in. I became an on-air reporter. Pretty green, pretty dreadful. But I had drive and moxie, and I was determined to advance. So there was a story about unsanitary conditions at restaurants in Washington, D.C., one of which was a Tony French restaurant called Le Provençal. And it was cited for unsanitary conditions. Oh my goodness. So I barged in, Mike Wallace style, into the restaurant, demanded to see the owner to explain how he could be cited for unsanitary conditions. There sat Bill Small, the bureau chief for the Washington Bureau of CBS News, having lunch. He watched me in this Mike Wallace type moment and said, gave me his card and said, call me. I said, okay. I looked at my watch and I thought, oh, let's see, he'll probably be back in the office in about 20 minutes. So tick, tick, tick. I decided I'll call him. And I called him. He hired me as a reporter. Hooray! Next step was that he was conscious of this pressure to hire women. So when he hired me, a Chinese person, Michelle Clark, a black, Leslie Stahl, a nice Jewish girl with blonde hair, and Sylvia Chase. We were considered really aberrations. We were aardvarks. We were frequently uh, asked to cover female type stories, what would be commonly seen on the women's page of a newspaper. Uh, Particularly, I got saddled with covering Pat Nixon, wife of President Richard Nixon. And lovely as she was known as Plastic Pat and known to never do anything that was going to be on the news. It was benign, uh, what we considered protective coverage in the event that something happened. We had to have our cameras there. The men easily would tell the assignment editor no when asked to go cover Pat Nixon. I just couldn't do it. I didn't want to be uncooperative. I didn't want to be called the B word. Um, and so I covered her. And the mistake I made was trying to make something of the story. I would ask her questions and she would answer. And sometimes it got on Walter Cronkite's evening news. And it was a glorious time to work for CBS because Walter Cronkite, who is the quintessential anchorman, was at the helm. And he was my idol. He was my role model. There were no women to be role models for me or for any of the other women coming up. The women never even had a moment to breathe, let alone talk to each other about uh, how we could create a force. The only person who was a little bit older than Leslie Stahl and I were was Sylvia Chase, and she was never afraid to uh, to be part of the so-called feminist movement. I would never, I dare suggest that I was a feminist, nor did I want to be. I was not a bra burner. I was just trying to do my job and try to keep my head above water. When Sylvia asked us to come up to New York, Leslie and asked Leslie and me to come up to New York to gather with the other women and meet with the president of the entire CBS, a man named Arthur Taylor. Leslie and I were too scared to go. So we said, oh, we can't. We have stories to cover. So you see, it was a daunting experience in Washington in particular, because all I saw around me was a sea of men in the newsroom, my competitors in television news, print reporters who were competitors, magazine reporters who were competitors, and the people I covered were all men. White House, State Department, Pentagon, uh, on Capitol Hill, forget about it. There were hardly any women. So I decided, just not a conscious decision, but I decided I too would be one of the guys. I would have chutzpah. I would have bravado the way they did. I would walk into a room and command it, that I would own the room the way they did. I decided I would have a saucy mouth. one in which I could say all the bad words they were saying. Why not? And if they were throwing a sexual innuendo at me, I would throw one at them beforehand. And they were shocked. Here I was, a little lotus blossom, and I was throwing a sexual innuendo at them. They were left speechless. I really got a kick out of that. I would laugh under my breath. So, since I considered myself one of them, because as I looked around, I couldn't see me. I was so convinced that I was just another white guy that when I walked past a mirror or a storefront, I'd go, because I'd see a Chinese woman staring back at me, and who the heck is that? As a woman, they could treat me the way they treated all the women, which was with sexist remarks and uh, just not taking us seriously. Um, And I found that was true for me. And maybe because I was Asian, it was more pronounced because I was a double dose of dutiful. I was not only a woman, I was a minority, particularly Asian. So when I was showing my moxie, it would kind of throw them off kilter, which I loved. It was very gratifying to throw some bloviating politician off his game because they wouldn't expect me to come up with a tough question. And they would sort of uh, wonder how did that come out of her sweet little mouth? I encountered a lot of creeps. Henry Kissinger used to try and flirt with me. John Mitchell, who was the attorney general and became the head of the committee to reelect the president, I was trying to interview him on Capitol Hill, and he looked at me and said, "You look so pretty." And I thought, and he had a pipe in his mouth, and you know what I wanted to do with that pipe? It I tell you, I ignored it and moved on and asked my question. What else was I to do but proceed with doing my job? So it was a daily occurrence. There's nothing to cry about, nothing to scream about, nothing to raise red flags about, nothing to burn my bra about. I was just trying to do my job, so I did. I have a suspicion that some of the women who say they didn't experience sexual harassment, uh, might have blocked it out of their heads, because I think it would be virtually impossible for a woman during our era of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, even 90s, to have not experienced some um, sexual harassment. And it's something that we just lived with. It's not as if we ran to the ladies' room and cried. Um, that just wasn't in our wheelhouse. We just considered it part of the game. Politicians, in particular, have felt that they had the power to try and kiss us or put their hands where their hands shouldn't be. I was approached by the presidential candidate, George McGovern, who tried to kiss me, but then quickly backed off when I leaned back. And just when I was on my book tour for my memoir, someone who had been on Capitol Hill too, a woman, said that he tried to proposition her too about 15, 20 years later after me. And she said, why don't you try a prostitute? Or she said, or get a dog. And if women stand down, we're cooked. So we cannot stand down. We have to keep fighting the good fight. It's imperative that we do. Otherwise, we'll be buried under their dung. And I don't think, and we don't deserve that. George McGovern, when he was running against President Nixon. But mind you, McGovern was never expected to win the Democratic nomination. When he did, and he was facing President Nixon, there I was covering him. So then I covered Watergate. And it was a time when Capitol Hill was respectable and the members of Congress were respectable. Unlike today, it's quite remarkable that it has changed so dramatically. The conservatives negotiated with the liberals. They had a they enjoyed a camaraderie of wanting to do things that were good for the country. Oh, what a great idea! Um, that today in 2024 doesn't exist anymore, and I I rue the day that things began to change on Capitol Hill. My parents were born and raised in China. They they were born in 1909 and 1911 with extremely traditional values of traditional Chinese values. My parents had 10 children, 10. I was the 10th, the only one born in the United States. 9 were born in China, 5 of whom died as infants. When my parents came to the United States, my father worked for Chinese intelligence. He was a spy, a spook working for Chiang Kai shek. Enter the communists who were complicating the whole uh, political balance in the country. And my father decided, I'm not staying around to find out if the communists win or Chiang Kai shek wins. I'm taking my family to the United States. He finagled a way to do so. And when he got here, I was born and I was yet another girl. So my parents raised 5, quite frankly, ballsy sisters. One day, my father wrote me a letter when I was already in the news business, and he said, basically, maybe you can become the son we never had. It was a remarkable moment in my life. He said, maybe you can carry on the name Chung so that generations ahead will know how you came to the United States, basically how he did it. And I think I took that mission seriously to chisel the name Chung in history in some way or another. I wish I had said no or stood my ground a few more times, but it was difficult. I think I said in my book that the first one through the door faces the heaviest gunfire. There's a benefit to be gained in the end, and I found the benefit. The benefit came to me by way of a young woman named Connie Wong, Wang. She cold emailed me one day and said, I am named Connie after you. And I thought, you're kidding. And she found that there were untold numbers of Asian parents who named their daughters Connie after me in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And I was so flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. And I tell you, it was the most glorious day I had ever experienced to meet these dozen or so Connies named after me. I had never thought that I had any impact with my career. I always thought, well, I can't. Maybe I did, eh, lay the groundwork for this incredible phenomenon. Connie Aramaki, the photographer, said to me, what it means being named after you is that you should be brave, work hard, and take chances. And I think she's right. She picked three adjectives that apply. But I have to say, there's one last uh, honor that I have received that I must share with you. Um, I have a strain of weed named after me. It's called Connie Chung weed. If you go online, you'll see that I'm easy to grow. I don't give you the scaries that much, and I'm low maintenance. Very proud to say I'm low maintenance.